Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone if being seen feels dangerous to you. It's not weakness, it's history. And today we're going to gently unpack why. There comes a moment in almost everyone's life when you realize that being seen feels dangerous. Not because there's anything inherently wrong with you, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that showing your true self could bring judgment, rejection, or even ridicule. Maybe it started in childhood when your words were dismissed, your feelings minimized, or your curiosity met with harsh criticism. Maybe it was in a relationship, at work, or in a group where you quickly learned that vulnerability could be weaponized. Over time, you internalize this quiet rule: if you want to survive, you hide. This instinct to hide is not weakness. In fact, it's a deeply human response to protection. Hiding your emotions, your thoughts, your dreams, your quirks, your fears, it all felt like survival. You learn to dim your light, shrink your voice, and make yourself small to avoid the discomfort of being truly known. And for years, that strategy worked. You got through situations where being visible might have hurt you. You avoided criticism, you avoided shame, and in that sense, you were safe. But safety has a price. The cost of hiding is not always immediately obvious. It shows up in quiet moments, in the spaces between conversations, in the pause before you speak your mind, in the lingering question of who you might have been if you dared to step forward. It shapes your relationships, the way you make choices, and even the way you see yourself. What once protected you now feels like a cage. You can see it in the subtle tension of always measuring your words, in the hesitation to express joy fully, or in the fear that someone might notice your imperfections and decide you are not enough. Recognizing this is the first step toward freedom. You begin to understand that the fear of being seen is not a flaw. It is a story you learn to survive by, the armor you wore was necessary at one point, but it no longer needs to define your life. You can start to notice when you are shrinking, when you are dimming your presence, and when the instinct to hide is guiding your choices instead of your values. This awareness doesn't erase the fear immediately. It simply allows you to hold it gently, without judgment. There is power in seeing this pattern, in naming it for what it is, a strategy that served you once but may now be limiting you. You might reflect quietly on the moments where you held back, the times you silenced your voice, or the dreams you abandoned because they felt too risky to share. And then slowly, you can begin to experiment with being visible in small, safe ways. A gesture, a word, a thought, a story, anything that affirms you have a right to occupy space. Each step reminds you that while the world may not always respond kindly, hiding only guarantees that your presence and your potential remains unseen. The journey of being seen begins with noticing the fear, acknowledging the story that shaped it, and choosing over and over to let yourself be visible anyway. The path is not linear, and there will be moments when the fear seems overwhelming. But each time you allow yourself to step forward, even just a little, you reclaim pieces of yourself that were lost to caution. You begin to understand that showing up fully is not recklessness, it is courage. And it is in this courage that you will find the quiet liberation of living authentically, without apology or disguise. There is a kind of protection we all build, often without even realizing it, that feels solid, reliable, and necessary. It can start as a thought, a habit, or even a posture we adopt in response to the world telling us that who we are is too much, too fragile, or too vulnerable. Over time, it becomes armor. This armor feels safe because it shields us from the risk of being hurt, judged, or rejected. It allows us to navigate life without exposing the tender parts of ourselves, the parts that long to connect, to be understood, to be accepted just as we are. And yet, as much as this armor protects, it also confines. It holds us back from experiencing life fully, from embracing the richness of human connection, from stepping into the fullness of who we were meant to be. This armor can take many forms. Sometimes it is visible, a hard exterior, a sharp tongue, a mask of perfection, a controlled persona designed to keep others at bay. Sometimes it is invisible, the self-doubt we carry, the hesitation to speak up, the habit of shrinking ourselves so we do not inconvenience others. We might not even notice it at first because it often feels like the only way to survive. We learn to trust the armor more than we trust ourselves. We lean on it as if it were a shield, forgetting that shields are meant to be temporary, tools for the moment, not the architecture of our lives. The inner struggle that comes with armor is subtle but persistent. On the surface, you may feel secure. You may navigate relationships, careers, and social situations without immediate pain or exposure. You may convince yourself that you are cautious, practical, or disciplined, that this is just the way the world works. But underneath, there is a quiet tension that never fully goes away. There is the whisper that says, if I reveal too much, I could lose something or someone. There is the internal voice that cautions, be careful, be safe, do not get noticed too much. That tension is not random. It is the echo of experiences where visibility felt risky, where being fully yourself seemed to invite harm rather than acceptance. And so life becomes a delicate dance between the desire to be authentic and the instinct to protect. You long to show up fully, to share your thoughts and feelings, to embrace your passions and quirks, but the armor makes you hesitate. It holds you in check, reminding you that safety lies in restraint that the world might not. Be ready for the truth of who you are. You become practiced at holding back, at softening your edges, at shrinking in order to avoid conflict, criticism, or disappointment. And in the process, you may not even realize how much of your life is being lived behind a barrier that you once thought was indispensable. The emotional toll of this armor is profound. It can leave you feeling isolated, even in the presence of others. You may wonder why connections feel shallow, why intimacy feels impossible, why you sometimes sense a distance between yourself and those you care about. The armor, while protective, prevents the vulnerability that is necessary for deep connection. It makes you cautious with your words, wary of your emotions, hesitant to risk being fully known. Over time, this caution can erode self-trust. You may start to doubt your instincts, question your worth, and wonder if the parts of yourself you hide are the parts that truly matter. Yet there is hope in recognizing this pattern. Awareness is the first step toward reclaiming the parts of yourself that the armor has kept hidden. When you notice the ways in which you overprotect, when you name the habits and behaviors that serve as shields, you begin to create space for choice. You realize that armor is not permanent. You can loosen it layer by layer, allowing yourself to experience life without constantly calculating the risk. This is not easy, and it is not instantaneous, but it is possible. It begins with small acts, a word spoken honestly, a feeling acknowledged, a boundary held without apology. Each act chips away at the armor, revealing the authentic self beneath. Learning to let down the armor requires courage because it confronts the deep-seated fear that has kept it in place. There is a fear of being misunderstood, of being ridiculed, of being dismissed or ignored. There is the fear that opening yourself up will result in loss of respect, of relationships, of security. These fears are real and valid, yet they are often magnified in the mind, larger than the reality of the moment. The challenge is to step into vulnerability despite the fear, to practice showing up even when the outcome is uncertain, and to trust that your worth is not contingent on external validation. The transformative power of loosening your armor comes in subtle, profound ways. When you allow yourself to be seen, even in small measures, you begin to experience a sense of liberation. You may notice the relief of no longer carrying the weight of perfection or control. You may find that relationships deepen, that conversations become more authentic, that your presence is more impactful simply because it is real. You begin to understand that the world is not waiting to punish you for your vulnerability, and that the fear you carried was a signal of the protection your soul no longer needs. Practical steps toward this transformation can be simple, but they require intentionality. Start by identifying one area of your life where the armor feels heaviest. Notice the behaviors, thoughts, or patterns that keep you protected but also isolated. Choose one small act of authenticity in that space, a thought shared, an emotion expressed, a small risk taken, and observe the outcome without judgment. Practice the habit of noticing when your instinct to hide arises and pause to question it. Ask yourself, do I need to protect myself this much right now, or is it safe to show a little more? Over time, these small actions accumulate and the armor loosens naturally, replaced by the quiet strength of self-trust. It is important to remember that this is a process, not a one-time decision. There will be moments when the fear returns, when the instinct to protect yourself feels stronger than ever. In those moments, gentle awareness and self-compassion are essential. Acknowledge the fear, honor the history that created it, and then make a conscious choice to step forward anyway. Each act of courage, no matter how small, reinforces the truth that your presence matters, your voice matters, and your authenticity has value. Ultimately, letting go of the armor is an invitation to live fully. It is an invitation to experience life in its rawness, its beauty, its connection, and its challenge. It is a recognition that safety is not the absence of risk, but the ability to navigate risk with integrity and honesty. By gradually shedding the layers that no longer serve you, you open yourself to growth, intimacy, and the joy of being truly seen. The journey is not without fear, but it is in the willingness to face that fear, to step into visibility despite it, that you find your strength, your freedom, and the profound satisfaction of living authentically. Courage is often misunderstood. We tend to picture it as bold, loud, heroic, a dramatic act that changes everything in an instant. But real courage is quieter than that. It is the kind of courage that shows up in the trembling voice, in the heart racing behind careful words, in the decision to take a small step forward, even when the outcome is uncertain. It is not the absence of fear, it is moving forward despite it. Every person who has ever grown, healed, or transformed has had to confront this truth. Courage does not arrive fully formed. It arrives in the moments when you choose to show up again and again, even when your inner voice whispers that hiding is safer. The inner struggle that courage confronts is fear, deep, unrelenting fear. The fear of judgment, of rejection, of failure. The fear that if others see you clearly, they will decide you are not enough. The fear that your truth is too heavy, too messy, too imperfect to be welcomed. This fear is not irrational. It is rooted in every experience that taught you vulnerability could be painful. And it is precisely this fear that makes courage so powerful. Each time you act despite fear, you reclaim a piece of yourself that hiding has kept locked away. Courage often feels like trembling. It feels like uncertainty, hesitation, and discomfort. You may not feel ready. You may not feel worthy. You may question your own strength, your own capacity, your own right to occupy space in the world. But the paradox of courage is that you do not need to feel ready. You do not need to feel worthy. You only need to choose to show up with all of your imperfection and uncertainty and trust that the act itself will teach you what you need to know. Every time you practice this kind of courage, the trembling heart learns to trust itself. The voice learns to trust its own truth, and the spirit begins to expand into the life it was meant to live. This is why courage is not always celebrated. The world often rewards certainty, control, and performance. It admires the bold, the successful, the unflinching. But true courage is quieter. It is in the single parent who says what needs to be said to a loved one, even knowing it could spark conflict. It is in the employee who speaks a difficult truth to a manager, even at the risk of disapproval. It is in the friend who admits they are hurting, even when vulnerability feels like a weakness. It is in the student, the artist, the writer, the dreamer who dares to show their work, their thoughts, their emotions, their heart, knowing that judgment is possible. These acts are courage, small yet profound, subtle yet transformative. Courage also requires self-compassion. It is easy to mistake hiding for wisdom, to believe that if we avoid exposure, we are being smart. We tell ourselves that caution protects us from harm, that restraint is maturity, that silence is prudence. But without self-compassion, courage becomes impossible. We cannot face fear if we condemn ourselves for feeling it. We cannot risk being seen if we believe our imperfection is shameful. Self-compassion teaches us that fear is a natural response, that vulnerability is a sign of life, and that taking risks does not diminish our worth. It reminds us that courage is a practice, not a perfection, and that even small steps forward matter immensely. The practical steps toward cultivating this quiet courage are deceptively simple, yet they demand consistency. Begin by noticing where fear is holding you back, what conversations you avoid, what risks you refuse, what truths you remain silent about. Ask yourself, what is the smallest act of courage I can take right now? Perhaps it is speaking your opinion in a meeting, sharing a thought with a friend, or acknowledging a feeling you have been suppressing. Perhaps it is admitting a mistake, apologizing, or requesting what you need. These small acts of bravery accumulate, and with repetition, they expand your comfort zone and teach you to tolerate discomfort without retreating. Another essential practice is reflection. After each courageous act, take time to observe the effect. Notice the relief, the connection, or even the discomfort that arises. Understand that discomfort does not mean failure. It means you are stretching, growing, and reclaiming parts of yourself that hiding once confined. Over time, the act of facing fear repeatedly rewires your inner dialogue. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes achievable. And the voice that once whispered, "Stay hidden," begins to soften, replaced by a quieter, stronger truth. I can handle this. I can show up. I am enough. Courage is also contagious. When you choose to show up as you are, you create permission for others to do the same. Your bravery signals to those around you that vulnerability is not weakness, that imperfection is human, that connection is possible even when it feels risky. You may never fully realize the impact of your courage, but it ripples outward in ways that inspire, comfort, and challenge others to reclaim their own authenticity. Each act of courage contributes to a culture, a circle, a family, a community in which people are more willing to be seen, more willing to be honest, more willing to live fully. It is important to recognize that courage does not eliminate fear. It does not guarantee safety, approval, or success, but it does guarantee growth. Each act of courage strengthens the connection between who you are and who you are becoming. It teaches resilience, self-trust, and emotional strength. It allows you to step into experiences fully without shrinking, without pretense, and without apology. Courage transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary simply because it requires that you bring all of yourself, your imperfections, your doubts, your dreams into the world without hiding. Ultimately, embracing courage is a daily practice, a commitment to showing up in life even when it is uncomfortable, uncertain, and scary. It is a declaration that your presence matters, your voice matters, and your truth matters. It is the choice to walk forward with your heart open, even when the path is unclear. And in this choice lies the quiet but profound realization that life, in all its richness and complexity, is meant to be lived fully visible, fully vulnerable, and fully human. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act in spite of it, and in doing so, you discover the remarkable power and beauty of simply being yourself. Letting yourself take up space is one of the quietest yet most radical acts of courage a person can commit to. For much of life, you may have been trained to shrink, to fit into spaces not meant for you, to make yourself smaller so that others could feel comfortable. Perhaps it started as subtle lessons in childhood, being told to sit still, speak softly, or not make a fuss. Maybe it was reinforced in adolescence, in friendships where your opinions were dismissed, or in workplaces where your contributions were overlooked. Over time, these small signals add up, shaping a deep belief that to survive or belong, you must occupy less than your full self. The paradox, of course, is that The very act of shrinking does not guarantee safety. It simply keeps you small while the world passes by. The inner struggle that comes with learning to take up space is complex. Fear, self-doubt, and conditioned obedience create a persistent tension. You may feel the pull to assert yourself, to speak your truth, or to pursue what you want, but a quiet voice warns you that doing so could lead to rejection, criticism, or even loneliness. The struggle is not external, it is internal. It is the clash between your desire to be visible, heard, and acknowledged, and the internalized belief that doing so might be dangerous. The challenge is compounded by the fact that this belief has been reinforced for years, often subtly, until it feels like a natural part of who you are. Recognizing that it is not inherent but learned is the first step toward reclaiming your presence. This fear of taking up space can manifest in countless ways. You may hold back in meetings, never contributing the ideas you know could make a difference. You may soften your words or downplay your accomplishments so as not to intimidate others. You may stay silent in moments that matter, prioritizing comfort over authenticity. Even in personal relationships, you might defer, accommodate, or avoid asserting your needs because it feels safer to blend into the background. And yet, each act of shrinking comes at a cost. Your voice, your ideas, your energy, and even your joy are diminished. You learn to live on the outskirts of your own life, hoping to be noticed without risking the full expression of yourself. The emotional truth is that taking up space is not about dominance, arrogance, or entitlement. It is about honoring your right to exist fully and authentically. It is about giving yourself permission to be seen, to speak, to contribute, and to inhabit the world without apology. This act is both simple and profound. It can be as subtle as raising your hand in a discussion when you would normally stay silent, as deliberate as asserting a boundary with a loved one, or as bold as pursuing a passion you have long kept hidden. Each act of presence is a declaration that you are not invisible, that your thoughts, feelings, and existence matter. One of the most difficult parts of learning to take up space is confronting the fear of how others will react. You may worry that speaking up will create tension, that asserting yourself will push people away, or that your needs will be dismissed. These fears are real, but they are also exaggerated by years of habit and self-protection. The truth is that showing up as yourself does not require the approval of others. You do not need permission to occupy space, to express your thoughts, or to live in alignment with your values. Your presence itself is a contribution, and your authenticity has inherent worth regardless of external recognition. The practical steps toward taking up space start with awareness and intentionality. Begin by observing the ways you habitually shrink or minimize yourself. Notice the patterns in conversations, in relationships, in work, and in moments of personal expression where you defer, soften, or silence yourself. Once you identify these moments, choose one small action that asserts your presence. Speak up in a meeting, share an idea, voice an opinion, or express a feeling you might normally withhold. Each of these acts, while small, trains your nervous system to tolerate visibility and encourages a shift in your internal narrative about what it means to be safe, worthy, and valued. Another crucial practice is self-validation. Taking up space can feel uncomfortable, especially in the early stages. You may encounter resistance, both internally in the form of self-doubt and fear, and externally in the form of reactions from others unaccustomed to your presence. In these moments, it is vital to acknowledge your effort and courage. Remind yourself that discomfort is not failure. It is a sign that you are expanding, that you are practicing a new way of being, and that you are reclaiming territory within yourself that was long ceded to fear. Over time, consistently taking up space transforms not only your own life, but also the dynamics of the world around you. Relationships deepen because people experience your authenticity. Opportunities arise because your contributions are visible and valued. Your confidence grows because you begin to trust that your voice matters and that your presence has weight. This is not about overwhelming others or dominating a space. It is about standing fully in your truth and inviting others to meet you there, creating connection rather than isolation, presence rather than absence. It is also essential to recognize that taking up space is a practice, not a destination. There will be moments when fear resurfaces, when the instinct to shrink feels strong, and when the temptation to retreat seems safe. In those moments, gently remind yourself of the work you have done, the courage you have cultivated, and the value of your presence. Each time you choose visibility over retreat, you reinforce your self-worth and strengthen your capacity to engage fully with life. Ultimately, letting yourself take up space is an act of self-respect, authenticity, and empowerment. It is a declaration that your life, your voice, and your being matter. It is the recognition that growth, connection, and fulfillment are only possible when you are willing to inhabit your own life fully, without apology or diminishment. The journey is not always easy, but it is deeply rewarding. Each act of courage, each moment of visibility, each choice to assert your presence chips away at the fear that once held you back and allows you to move through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and claims their right to exist fully. Growth begins where hiding ends. For so many years, you may have thought that safety, comfort, or acceptance depended on blending in, shrinking, or suppressing parts of yourself. You carried your armor, dimmed your light, and hesitated to speak your truth, believing that this was the cost of survival, of belonging, or of being loved. But the truth is that hiding keeps you alive in a limited way. It preserves life, yes, but it does not allow you to thrive. Real growth, the kind that transforms your inner world and your outer life, begins when you make the conscious choice to stop hiding, to let your authenticity breathe, and to allow yourself to be seen fully. The inner struggle at this stage is immense because it is not just about fear of judgment or shame. It is also about confronting the parts of yourself that you have long denied. You may have avoided your own desires, silenced your dreams, or ignored your intuition because it felt unsafe to act on them. The patterns that once protected you are now holding you back. There is a tension between the person you've been conditioned to be and the person you are capable of becoming. Facing this tension requires courage, reflection, and a willingness to be uncomfortable because growth never occurs in a vacuum. It demands that you move through the resistance that fear and habit create. The emotional truth of growth is that it is messy, unpredictable, and profoundly human. It cannot be scheduled, forced, or controlled. You will stumble, you will doubt yourself, and you will feel exposed in ways that are unfamiliar. You may worry that showing up fully will alienate others or that your authenticity will be rejected. These fears are not mistakes. They are signs that you are stretching beyond the familiar boundaries that once defined you. Growth requires embracing uncertainty, leaning into discomfort, and trusting that your life is meant to expand rather than contract. Letting go of the habit of hiding allows you to experience connection in its deepest form. When you stop shielding yourself from the world, you open the door to genuine intimacy. You can speak your truth without apology, express your feelings without fear, and share your experiences without the burden of pretense. Relationships become more honest, more nourishing, and more mutually empowering. You begin to attract people who resonate with your authenticity rather than tolerate a version of you that was safe but incomplete. This is the beauty of growth. It transforms not only your perception of yourself, but also the quality of your connections with others. The practical path toward this kind of growth is both simple and challenging. It begins with conscious choices, small and deliberate, that affirm your right to exist fully. Practice noticing when you are shrinking or hiding and intentionally choose to act differently. Speak up in situations where silence has been your default. Express feelings you might otherwise suppress. Pursue a passion or interest that has long been dormant. Each of these acts is a step away from hiding and a step toward authentic living. Over time, these small acts compound, creating a momentum that carries you into greater freedom, confidence, and self-expression. Reflection is also essential to the process. Growth is not only measured by visible achievements, but by your internal alignment, by the extent to which you are living in accordance with your values, embracing your fears, and honoring your truth. Take time to journal, meditate, or simply sit with your thoughts. Observe the ways in which you have grown, the fears you have confronted, and the moments when you chose visibility over retreat. Recognize that discomfort is not failure. It is evidence of movement, of expansion, of transformation. Each time you choose growth over hiding, you reclaim a piece of yourself that has long been constrained by fear. A critical part of this journey is self-trust. Growth demands that you believe in your capacity to handle what life presents, even when outcomes are uncertain. You learn to rely on your own judgment, intuition, and resilience rather than seeking constant validation or approval. This does not mean you will be immune to setbacks or mistakes. On the contrary, growth requires that you embrace them as essential teachers. Each stumble becomes an opportunity to refine your understanding, deepen your self-awareness, and strengthen your emotional and mental resilience. The more you practice this kind of self-trust, the more capable you become of navigating life with clarity, courage, and authenticity. Growth also involves embracing your full emotional spectrum. You cannot truly expand if you avoid or suppress any part of yourself. Joy, sorrow, anger, love, disappointment, hope, they are all integral to the human experience. Allowing yourself to feel deeply and fully without judgment is part of stepping into your authentic life. Emotional openness cultivates empathy, strengthens connections, and enhances self-understanding. It reminds you that your capacity to experience life fully is inseparable from your willingness to feel it fully. Finally, growth is a practice of presence. It requires showing up consistently, moment by moment, in the choices you make, the way you engage with others, and the way you engage with yourself. It is the conscious decision to inhabit your life fully, rather than retreat into safety or familiarity. Growth is not a destination. It is a process, a daily commitment, a journey toward living authentically, courageously, and deeply. The life you desire, meaningful, connected, and expansive, awaits on the other side of hiding. The first step is simply to stop shrinking, to claim your right to exist fully, and to trust that as you do, everything you need to thrive will follow. In the end, growth is not just about achieving goals or accumulating accomplishments. It is about reclaiming your voice, your presence, and your right to live as the person you were always meant to be. It is about turning toward life with courage, embracing the discomfort of visibility, and discovering that you are capable of more than you ever allowed yourself to believe. When hiding ends, growth begins. And in that space, you encounter the freedom, connection, and fulfillment that can only come from living fully, honestly, and courageously.